Well, I love Chinese food. I mean, I can never seem to get enough of General Tso's chicken. It is the best. But do you know what I don't love? I actually don't love fortune cookies. They taste dry and bland, and they're hard. Why would anybody want to eat them? I know for some, what might draw their attention is the actual fortune inside, but I can also do without that. I would much rather focus on Scripture. But having said that, our points today almost seem to sound like random one-liners that could be used in fortune cookies. So I would like to call our attention today to some biblical fortune cookie wisdom. We already talked about giving and praying in secret, and today we're adding two more to the list. So here's the next one. This is Matthew 6, verses 16 through 18. It says this, "And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you." Now, I totally love the holiday season. Now, some people get all offended because they're forced to say or hear those dreaded words, "Happy Holidays," instead of "Merry Christmas." And I get why they're upset, but it truly is a holiday season. I mean, typically, Thanksgiving kicks off the season, and depending on the calendar each year, Hanukkah is next, followed by Christmas and New Year's. In fact, we could say Happy Holidays almost any time of the year, even now, because there seems to be a holiday for practically every day of the year. National Donut Day, President's Day, Earth Day, Boss's Day, and the list goes on and on and on. In fact, pastors get a whole month. We get Pastor's Appreciation Month. But there's also National Chili Dog Day, National Cheesecake Day, National Intern Day, National Father-in-Law Day, and National Whistleblower Day. And actually, those all take place all in one day. Now, depending on when you're watching this video, it could be any time of the year, but you're probably close to a holiday no matter when you watch this video. I can guarantee you there is some kind of holiday either going on or about to go on in the very near future. As I was originally editing this particular message, it was actually Halloween. And now as I'm recording, it's actually January. So for me, New Year's Eve was just a few short days ago. And by the time the first audience watches this video, it'll probably be post Super Bowl and post Valentine's Day. So I wonder if the Eagles will make it to the Super Bowl this year. I don't know. It's really not looking good right now. I can't imagine they're going to make it, but we will see. Time will tell. Now, the traditional holiday season that I love the most, and the one most people think of when we think of the holidays, is from Thanksgiving all the way through New Year's Day. And for me, the yearly traditions never get old. Every year, those traditions still feel special. The best tradition, of course, in my humble opinion, is watching Hallmark Christmas movies. Now, there is nothing better. Now, some people cherish the season for other lesser reasons like family, but nobody's perfect, except for Jesus. But having said that, it's obvious that we in America never go without anything. We always have everything we need. Now, there might be times when we don't get everything we want, but we always seem to have what we need. Even the poorest of the poor here in America are richer than most of the rest of the world. And I know this makes me sound like Scrooge, but I don't get all teary-eyed when someone talks about someone not getting a Christmas gift. What gets me teary-eyed is when people actually go without things that they really need. So if someone is not getting food, clothing, shelter, or even love, especially family, relational love, that'll show up on my radar screen. I'm afraid that we in America have lost sight of what's really important and where our blessings come from. That's one reason I enjoy Thanksgiving. I mean, we get to be thankful to God for everything He provides. Now, truth be told, one day is not enough, of course, but at least we take a day to thank Him. But what if we took it one step further? What if we purposely denied ourselves, which is going to be the opposite of what we typically do at Thanksgiving? What if we purposely denied ourselves in order to understand what it's really like to be hungry? What if we denied ourselves in order to understand what it's really like to need something? That's where fasting comes into the picture. Now, wait, what? Fasting? What in the world is that, right? Why would anybody do that? Unfortunately, fasting is a lost art. There is still a small minority trying to do it for weight loss. Intermittent fasting was popular when it first came out for weight loss, but that's not the kind of fasting we're talking about today. In fact, if you mention fasting to most Christians today, they will give you a deer in the headlights look. To deny ourselves of anything we want or need is totally foreign to our self-driven culture that demands everything fast and now. On the other hand, we can do something good like fasting for the wrong reasons. And that's the point Jesus is making in this passage. It's so easy to get off course and forget why we're doing something. That's what was happening with the Jews of the Old Testament as well as the religious elite during the time of Jesus. It was God through Zechariah who said this in Zechariah 7, 5 through 6. During these 70 years of exile, when you fasted and mourned in the summer and in early autumn, was it really for me that you were fasting? And even now, in your holy festivals, aren't you eating and drinking just to please yourselves? Now, they were fasting and feasting for all the wrong reasons. And over 500 years later, Jesus makes the same point since he calls them hypocrites. So in the context of our study on the Sermon on the Mount, this point is almost a carbon copy of all the points Jesus just made about giving and giving to those in need and for prayer. So when we do anything as Christians, whether it be giving to the poor, praying, fasting, we shouldn't do it as a performance for people. We should do it for the Lord. It's for Him. And it should be in secret so no one else knows. And fasting is a way that we express our dependence on God. But why? What is fasting? Well, fasting is simply choosing not to eat for a period of time. When we fast, we learn to depend on God, just as we do in prayer. So prayer and fasting are supposed to go hand in hand. Fasting might be in a different way, it might be less frequent, but it's still a way to learn to depend on God. As we fast, we get closer to God and are able to listen and hear Him speak to us. We're not depending on food, we're depending on Him to show us what we need, for Him to speak to us, for Him to provide for our needs. But of course, in biblical times, just like with good deeds and giving and prayer, people were using fasting as a show. They were gaining attention by going out of their way to look gloomy and unkempt, right? It's kind of like scene stealing, okay? In acting terms, well, that's when someone takes over a scene and add things that aren't there or things that don't need to be there, right? It's done to gain attention, to steal the scene and to get recognition. Now, I actually had this happen to me once during a live show, and it was really annoying. It was the first and last time I ever got to play the bad guy, so I was all excited. Unfortunately, there was an actress with like one line who was drawing attention to herself. She was acting ridiculous, and her ridiculous behavior was distracting. It was distracting everyone from what was supposed to be going on in the scene. Now, she had never done that in any of the practices or the previews, but all of a sudden it's opening night and she's going a little crazy. Now, did she mean any harm by it? I don't think so. It was her first time on stage. Maybe she let the limelight go to her head a little bit. She thought she owned the place, but she heard the laughing, she heard the clapping, and she just wanted to get more of it because it felt good. The problem, however, is that the scene wasn't about her. And that's the point Jesus is making here. When you fast, do it in secret. Don't call attention to yourself. But if you do, and if you get applause for it, that's all the reward you're going to get. So that's our first point. Fasting in public draws attention to you, while fasting in secret draws you closer to God. And that's our first biblical fortune cookie point, okay? We're not supposed to gain attention or sympathy from people as an actor would in a show. He's saying, get washed up, clean yourself up, look normal. Don't let anyone know you're fasting. It's not for anyone else to know. It's between you and God. Despite the fact that it's a foreign concept to us in our day and age, it's a good idea to fast once in a while, especially if there's something you're struggling with. If it's something you need an answer to from God, you're like, I'm just not getting an answer. The point is dependence on God and keeping it between you and Him. Here's the next one. Here's verses 19 to 21. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Next up here is money. We had fasting, now we're up to money. And I'm sure you all know this, but man in general has been obsessed with money for thousands of years. And we have many expressions in our vocabulary to confirm that we have a money problem. Can you think of any? I can think of a few off the top of my head. If I don't get them all, maybe you can come up with some more in your small group. How about the man with the most toys wins? Follow the money, honey. Money talks. Rolling in the dough. Money makes the world go round. Time is money. Filthy rich. Getting the most bang for the buck. And finally, the almighty dollar. Obviously, we all have money on the brain. Now, in one sense, and in a very physical and earthly way, money does make the world go round because our entire lives and economy here in America and around the world runs on money. Buying, selling, consuming. We can't have a house or put food on the table without money. We need to make money. We need to be able to stay afloat. We need to be able to pay the bills, have food on the table, have a roof over our head. But money isn't actually the problem. We're the problem. Many Christians like to say that money is the root of all evil, but it's not. The Bible says this in 1 Timothy 6, 8 through 10, but if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. So money is not the root of all evil. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It's the love of money that's the problem. The issue, as Jesus has been pointing out with many other things in this message, is what we do with it, our motives, and what our goals are. So in light of that information, what is Jesus saying to us? Well, in the context of verses 19 to 21, it's important to note that at that time, houses could be broken into pretty easily. There were no security systems, no alarms, no laser beams to trigger an intruder alert. The walls of houses were made of mud bricks, and thieves could easily dig through them and steal. Because of this, some people invested their money in different ways. Some people invested their money with money changers. Some stored their money in temples where it will be much harder to steal. Some people would bury their money in the ground or in caves. Unfortunately, even all of that couldn't protect some possessions. When Jesus talks here about moths and rust, he's referring to moths that can destroy valuable fabrics and rust that could destroy coins. But Jesus isn't saying that we can't provide for our families. He's not saying we can't save money, but he is asking where our priorities are. He's saying not to let our possessions be our sole motivator in life because ultimately those possessions won't last. We need to store up our true treasures in heaven where they can't get rusted, where they can't get eaten or stolen. True riches will last for an eternity. The truth is that if we are only motivated by the pursuit of wealth, we are standing on shaky ground because it could all be gone just like that. Jesus wants us to be motivated by and pursue the things that will last. Then he follows that up by saying, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Now, in this context, the heart represents who we are and what's important to us. It represents what we desire and treasure the most. So it makes sense when he says that our heart is where our treasure is. If our treasure is money and power and wealth and prestige and possessions and pleasure and greed and the ambition to get ahead of everyone else, that's who we are and what we desire most. If our heart yearns for more than that, such as being generous, being willing to make sacrifices for the greater good, or looking out for someone else's needs rather than just our own and for the glory of God, our hearts might be in the right place. The reward for an attitude like that is going to stand the test of time. It will be a heavenly treasure that can't be stolen or destroyed. It will last for eternity. So here's a question that we all need to be asking ourselves. Do we own our possessions, or do they own us? If we fight for and protect what we have all the time, they might own us. They could disappear at any time. That's a scary place to be. Living in constant fear of losing it all is not a healthy place to be. A heart that is troubled by that and is driven by that is a heavy heart that's just waiting for a wake-up call, a spiritual heart attack. However, a heart attack isn't always a bad thing. Thank God for modern medicine, okay? Sometimes when we have a heart attack or a serious look at our hearts, we can see what's going on and what we need to fix. It could be a problem with our diet or the lack of exercise, or that we simply need to pursue a healthier lifestyle. There may be some things that we need to change if we want to live longer, if we want our hearts to hold out. And the same can be said spiritually. Jesus is giving us all a heart checkup to see where we're at and what we might need to change about our outlook for our lives, our money, our possessions, and our desires. Now, some people say, oh, this is too personal. You know, when it comes to money, some people don't want to change, right? Their whole life is wrapped up in it, whether they admit it or not. So where are our hearts when it comes to money and possessions? Do we try to protect our stuff at all costs? Are we obsessed with money? Are we counting who owes us money? Does money drive us? Do we always have to make that extra buck? Do we always have to just get one more thing? Are we ever satisfied with what we already have? Those are tough questions. And sometimes the answers change by the day, the month, and the year, right? And Jesus is stressing that the greater rewards are to come when we keep things in the proper perspective. And he's saying that we don't need to be materialistic or selfish. We need to be generous. And I don't think he's just talking about wealthy people either. I mean, there are no stereotypes when it comes to money. The stereotype would be that rich people are very selfish and poor people are not. But that is not always the case. It might even rarely be the case. I've seen some crazy examples on both sides. I've seen some extremely generous rich people who would give you the shirt off their back. And I have seen extremely materialistic and selfish poor people who will lie and cheat and steal to get ahead. I've seen plenty of underprivileged people get handout upon handout upon handout and then spit in someone's face when they don't pay up. There are many sides to this coin, but here is the key. No matter what our bottom line is, God will provide for our needs. As His children, God is going to provide for our needs. Our bottom line doesn't really matter. What matters is where the heart is. That's where our treasure is. With one stroke of a computer key, thieves can break in and steal. They don't need to dig through mud bricks. They can just hack you out of your money, right? With one bad investment, our money can be gone. Credit cards can drain us dry. Loans can kill us with just one bad day. Riches in this life can vanish in the blink of an eye, but riches beyond this life will last. That's some more good biblical fortune cookie wisdom. But let's keep moving here. This is verses 22 to 23. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Now, the illustration that Jesus gives here represents Jewish thought at that time. They believed that a good eye or a healthy eye meant that the person had a generally generous attitude when it came to money. A bad eye meant that the person was generally stingy when it came to money. Either way, it had to do with the perspective each person had when it came to money. Now, a bad eye refuses to let light in, so it stays in the darkness. A bad eye won't see the error of his ways because he refuses to let the light in. It has no chance of seeing, what it needs to see, whereas the good eye does. It's full of light. In the end, a healthy eye means devotion to God and a very generous spirit. A bad eye represents moral decay, a stingy heart that won't invest in what is truly important. It's only concerned about itself. Now, think of it as wearing glasses. If our vision is not 20/20, we need to see the eye doctor. He will most likely prescribe a pair of glasses that are custom made to make you see clearly, right? Some of us might like to wear them and some of us might not like to wear them. Regardless, it impacts our sight. Sometimes wives prefer to keep their glasses off by choice and try to imagine their husband as they used to be. Thinner, less wrinkly, more hair, and thinner. Did I say thinner? They go for the blurred look to soften the pain of what they see. When there's too much light, we like to wear sunglasses, right? So we can better see and drive at a safe speed down the road while looking cool at the same time, right? In this scripture, Jesus is offering us something very special. He's offering us corrective lenses that's going to allow us to see the truth. So we have to ask ourselves, which pair of glasses are we wearing? Are we already wearing corrective lenses? Or do we refuse to consider the truth of what Jesus is talking about? If so, we're never going to get the memo, and money will still own us. So God wants us to see the things that are truly important. And when we take away money's power and hold on us, we are free to live our lives in such a way as to please God. We can start to honor Him with what we have instead of fighting to keep it all to ourselves and protect our wealth. Looking over our shoulder all the time to protect our money is a very lonely and stressful place to be. So here's another biblical fortune cookie. The way we view the world is the way we will live our lives. A person's worldview is the way they live their life based on how they view the world, based on a certain set of predefined beliefs. So the person who is driven by money will do things that are in line with the pursuit of more money. And that pattern will continue unless something or someone comes along who can change or alter that worldview. It's where someone would come along and offer that person a new pair of glasses to help them see better. Now, somewhere along the line, in the movie Jerry Maguire, have you ever seen that one? Light bulbs started to go off in Tom Cruise's character's head, okay? His character started to see the importance of the relationships in his life, and other people started to see it too. At that point, the pursuit of contracts and clients seemed to become less important than the pursuit of the relationship he was forming with his one client. And his girlfriend and her little boy. Then we get to that famous scene near the end where he comes in and she says, "You had me at hello." In the end, relationships win out over money. And that's the point Jesus is making here. He wants us to see what's important. We might be screaming out, "Show me the money," right? But that's not what's important. Jesus is saying that He would rather have us honor God with our lives and use what He provides in a healthy way that is in line with His will. Here's the last verse, Matthew 6:24. "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." So Jesus gives one last illustration here to make his point. Although in this translation, the word serve doesn't do his point justice. Some translations use the word slave. And in this context, I think that's a better choice. And the point he's trying to make here is that a slave serves one master only. When you're a slave, you do what your master says. You work for him only. If you have two masters, your interests are going to be divided, and it doesn't work. And then he lays out what he's really talking about. He's talking about us either being a slave to God or being a slave to money. Now, the word money here could also mean possessions. So in all of these points, he keeps the issue alive of deciding whether or not we're going to be pursuing money and things or pursuing God's will for our lives. He wants us to use the money he provides in ways that will honor him. So in that sense, money is also a master that we could follow. But he says we can only pick one. He's giving us a choice. Eventually, we have to all make tough choices. We might be able to serve both for a while, but the day will come when the roads diverge, and we're going to have to make a choice who we're going to serve. And Jesus is asking us to make a choice. We need to either collect possessions and store up money that's going to pass away, or we need to collect treasures that we will see at a later date and that will stand the test of time. It's kind of like investing in a spiritual, eternal 401k now and benefiting later in eternity, or buying the sports car now and letting it wear out and getting our fun now. Unfortunately, that's over and done in a few years. It doesn't last. And what's worse about possessions is that it's never enough. As soon as we get stuff, we want more stuff, right? As soon as we have the sports car, now we want something else. We see this in our kids very easily, but we fail to see it in our own lives, right? Kids always want some new toy that's just so cool, and they just gotta have it because all their friends have it. And the older they get, the more expensive the toys seem to be. But 2 days after they get it, they're tired of it and they want something else. They're no longer satisfied. That's what the pursuit of money and possessions leads to. But it's not just kids. Adults are much worse. They're never satisfied. We always want more money, more possessions, and a bigger paycheck. Then they spend all their time protecting their wealth and possessions, paranoid that someone's going to steal something, and that hasn't changed in 2,000 years since Jesus said these words. That's a universal problem. It transcends space and time and age. And Jesus says that we have to make a choice. We can follow the rest of the world and take the road that everybody takes, or we can choose the narrow road, which makes all the difference in God's eyes. And the same is true again for many believers. It's probably why most people don't tithe. It's not the only reason, but it is a reason. Many people, including believers, are stretched so thin they have no money left over for God, and that's very unfortunate. It's hard to overcome until we realize we need to put God first and give to Him first, set that money aside first, and then work our budget around that. So Jesus doesn't give us the option here of sharing our devotion. We really have to make a choice. Now, some might think that's not fair or that they can do both, but it's like trying to be in love with more than one person. It just doesn't work. We can't have two husbands or two wives. If you try to divide your love like that, someone's going to get hurt. And there are plenty examples of that in the Old Testament, and it never ends well. There's much dysfunction, to say the least. Remember that scene in Indiana Jones Part 3 where Indiana had to choose which cup was the Holy Grail? You remember that? The first guy chose the one that looked the best and was made of a precious metal. But Indiana Jones knew that Jesus was a carpenter, and he chose the one that resembled the work of a carpenter, and he made the right choice. He chose wisely, right? The guy who chose the flashy one died. He chose poorly, right? So what's the bottom line? We don't own anything. Everything in this life is temporary. God owns it all. And you guys are going to talk about that in just a minute with your group. But before you go, I need to share one final piece of biblical fortune cookie wisdom. Here it is. We must decide whether we will follow the money or follow the one who owns it all. It's all God's. Now, he happens to choose to let us use some of his wealth. He's very good at sharing, but it's all his. And we need to use what he has shared with us to accomplish his purposes. Remember, Jesus told us to pray for God's will to be done, not our own. So have fun with your discussion and application, and I'll see you guys back here next time. God bless.